It was once believed that a grain of sand was the smallest fundamental thing that existed. Though Greek philosopher Democritus theorized that all things were made up of atomos around 400 BC, the existence of atoms wasn't considered proven until about 1905 with Einstein's analysis of Brownian motion. The structure of the atom and the parts that make it up were discovered shortly after, proving that even the atom wasn't the smallest thing. In the 1920s, we found that one of these parts, the electron, didn't behave consistently with how we define them. Then, in the 1950s, we discovered that protons and neutrons were actually hadrons, meaning they were actually composites of even smaller particles we call quarks. But we've never actually observed a quark. We are currently unable to, because the amount of energy required to separate two quarks is so tremendous that it results in the immediate creation of two antiquarks, which will pair with the original quarks forming a new hadron, or else annihilate first. We can only define a quark using mathematical calculations and computer simulations based on particle interactions observed in accelerators. That was a mouthful, I know. Sentences like that are what make us feel dumb enough to accept theories as facts. Isn't it something, though, that the most fundamental pieces of our reality cannot be observed, only calculated? This reminds me of a quote attributed to Niels Bohr. Everything we call real is made of things that cannot be regarded as real. If quantum mechanics has not profoundly shocked you, you have not understood it yet. Welcome to Whiskey and Words, Episode 3, Part 3, Jung's Theory of Everything. Quarks are pretty cool. On top of the things I just discussed about spontaneous creation and pair annihilation, there are some pretty wicked theories involving quarks. Some of them focus on things like quantum entanglement, others about what might happen if you could isolate a single quark and release it into an environment. I have my own theory about that. It's pretty sci-fi theory. It's got a very Ice Nine type of vibe to it. If that's not a reference you understand, you should check out Kurt Vonnegut's Cradle. It's a sci-fi novel. Basically satire, taking jabs at science, technology, religion, focusing on the arms race, and it's got a character and a storyline that kind of mirror Oppenheimer and the atom bomb, but the product they're creating is Ice Nine. And I don't want to ruin what Ice Nine is if you're going to read it. And if you want to read it and you can't find a copy, let me know after I read it again for the 5th or 6th time. I'll send it out to you, and you can give it a read. But you should definitely check it out. And if you have read it, or you do read it because I just mentioned it, and you think it'd be fun to come on and talk about quarks and Ice Nine, I think that would be a pretty cool conversation. So let me know in the comments. But there are two main points I want to make about quarks. The first one, as I've been saying in episode 3.1 and earlier in this episode, our model of reality is based off of observation. But there are gaps. There are things that we can't observe. And so our model of reality is based largely upon things that we have never actually observed, quarks. But our calculations about reality work out pretty well if quarks exist exactly as we define them to. And if you think about what that really means, it's kind of comical. The best way I've heard it described is convenient mathematical fiction. I'll say that again. Convenient mathematical fiction. Sounds pretty cool, right? The reason it's comical is because for as long as human beings have pondered the nature of our existence, there's been a battle between explanations offered by science and explanations offered by religion, when in reality, they're exactly the same thing. I know that sounds a little bit weird. Before I go on to explain what I just said, I want to warn you, if you're not an open-minded person, it's possible I'm about to say things that will be offensive to you, and if that's the case, we might just want to part ways here. I'm sorry that this isn't for you, but it's for the best. I'll give you a second to decide, then we'll move on. All right, if you're still here, let's continue. In religion, we observe our environment. And as I said, there are gaps. So in order to explain these gaps, we make up fictional stories with convenient characters that have characteristics and abilities that solve these problems in our observation, right? And even though we've never met any of these characters, we have faith that they existed. We have faith that the stories we've read and the stories we've been told are true. We have faith that they're not just some bullshit made up by human beings to manipulate and control other human beings. We have faith because our world makes sense if these stories are true, right? And also, they offer some useful lessons and things that we can model our life around and hopefully be better people because of it, of course. But basically, we observe the world, there's gaps. These stories fill in the gaps. They make us feel good about the world around us, so we have faith. In science, we do exactly the same thing. We observe our environment. As we've been discussing, there are gaps. So we make up fictional stories or calculations with convenient characters, quarks, that have the characteristics and abilities to fill in the gaps of the world that we see. And the only difference between these fictional stories and characters we come up with in science and the ones we come up with in religion are the names of those characters. That's right, I'm saying it. Quarks, God, same thing. Hopefully I didn't lose you just now. If you're still here, we'll move on to my second point, which is regarding the relationship between matter and energy. Now, these two things have long been considered interchangeable, two forms of the same stuff. We see it in Einstein's proof, E equals mc squared. We use it every day. We plug it into the calculations that make the world around us work, and so far so good, right? It all makes sense based on that interaction that we know. But the more we continue to break down matter into its smallest fundamental parts, the more we find that weird shit happens. The more we find that the sum of the parts doesn't always equal the whole, and we attribute that mostly to energy. It's a significant factor, of course, but if we apply Occam's razor to this scenario, there might be a simpler explanation. There is the possibility that matter is an illusion, that all that exists is energy, and the illusion of matter only occurs because of the interaction between the forces between that energy, right? They're super strong forces, so they make this solid on solid illusion occur. Let's consider something else that we know nothing about: consciousness. Now, if all things are energy, where does consciousness come into play? We don't know. How does this human-shaped cluster of energy become conscious? We don't know. But again, if we consider the simplest explanation, consider this out of the box yet incredibly simple idea. Consciousness and energy are the same thing. So, if all things are made of energy and energy is consciousness, all things are made of consciousness. Pretty simple, but hard to grasp, right? Because we don't attribute consciousness to all things equally. You accept that I am a conscious being sitting here talking to you, but you don't accept that this chair is a conscious being, right? How could it be the same as me? It doesn't think and feel as I do, so obviously we're different. But part of the problem there is that we consider all things individually. If we considered all things as a part of the larger body, all part of one whole, then we might see things a little bit differently. As an example, consider the parts of your own body. Think about nerve endings. You have billions of them in your body. They're quite complex. They interact with the environment. They send signals to your brain, so your brain understands that interaction, whether it's good or bad, whether it's painful or pleasurable. It's very important that that system works in order for you to survive. So consider me the nerve ending, right? Now think about another part of your body, your teeth. Pretty simple in comparison to a nerve ending, right? They're really just hard objects meant for crushing shit. But they're made of the same stuff, and they're equally important to that body. You need those hard objects to crush stuff, to ingest it, to survive. So even though these two things looked at as individuals are very, very different, they're still part of one larger body. They still serve one important function, and they work together, and they're made of the same stuff, right? So if we apply that relationship to the chair and myself, I'm the nerve ending, the chair is the tooth, but we're all part of one larger body made of the same stuff. Makes a little more sense, right? All right, we're getting closer to my main point, but before we get there, I want to say a couple of things. I'm not trying to claim that any of this stuff is fact that I'm about to say, right? I'm not even saying that I believe it to be true. I'm certainly not saying that I want you to believe that it's true, and I don't want you to think that I'm telling you that your personal beliefs are not true. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just asking what if, and I just want you to think about it. So I talked about science and religion and how we use both to make up fictional stories with convenient characters to explain the world around us. Now, here's my fictional story. In the beginning, there was nothing. All right, that was silly. You like what I did there? I was trying to give you a little bit of a feel of, similarity from the stories you've heard your whole life. But it sounded pretty ridiculous, so let's start over. In the beginning, there was nothing. Darkness, emptiness, infinity. But in this nothing was born a spark, a soul entity, energy, consciousness, the only being to exist in the infinite nothing. A dawn of life. A cluster of energy with no definite form or substance, only an awareness of itself. And what does a self-aware conscious entity do alone in the vast nothing? It attempts to answer the same questions that we all struggle with. What am I? Why am I here? With nothing to interact with but itself, it does what you or I would do. We would spread out through our environment using the tools at our disposal. Maybe a yell, the swinging of limbs. This entity does just that. It spreads. It explodes out into the nothing to discover what it is. And being only energy, it plays out every possible interaction between that energy. An infinite number of interactions. An infinite number of combinations, of movements, of structures. And to this entity, time is non-existent, and all of these interactions occur simultaneously. But to each individual interaction, the other interactions become disconnected from it as they each carry out the products of their own existence. These interactions eventually take on all possible forms, including what you and I know as reality. We are the product of one of an infinite number of chains of interaction, and even disconnected from each other and our own chains. We become individuals in a simulation of all possibilities. I am, and you are. All a part of the same and the only living being, the universe. Everything we are, everything we know, and everything we do is an attempt by the universe to understand itself. As I said, I'm not trying to convince you that this is the truth. I just want you to think about it. Consider the implications of this possibility. If you were to accept this as truth, every person you meet is literally you, experiencing life from a slightly different perspective. How would you approach life knowing this truth? How would you change the way you interact with other people? I'll tell you what I would do. In fact, I'll tell you what I already strive to do from this perspective. In every interaction, attempt to add positive value. Attempt to make that person's day a little better for having had that interaction with you. And by however small an amount, make that person's life better for having you in it. Spread positive energy, because improving that interaction is good for them, therefore good for the whole, and in turn, it's good for you. As my boys Bill and Ted would say, be excellent to each other. If you'd like a more comical version of this concept, you should check out Joe Rogan's bit about dolphins. I will link that in the description. It's pretty funny, but the same idea. Check it out. So, this fictional story, if you were to accept it as truth, opens up a lot of discussion possibility, which is what I'm trying to do, right? That's what I said I was trying to do from the beginning. Consider some of the beliefs and theories that you have currently and how they'd be different if you accepted this story as the truth. If you asked, is God real? Does God exist? You would have to say yes, right? But not in the traditional way, not in a way that you would normally think about God. He's not a bearded guy sitting up on a cloud. You wouldn't call him the creator of all things because God is all things, right? Me, you, the chair. I'm God. You're God. It's all God. Don't let that go to your head, though. What about some other things, like the Big Bang? What more clearly illustrates the concept of a Big Bang than consciousness and energy exploding from a single point out into the universe? What about simulation theory? Now, normally, when you consider simulation theory, you think about computers and programs. But as I talked about in that story, we're all just simulating every possible interaction between energy. So it's a different kind of simulation theory with a little bit different rules, but still fits the concept, right? We could discuss Rupert Sheldrake's work on morphic resonance, or Carl Jung's collective unconscious, or one central consciousness, which is really what we're talking about, right? And how we all have access to that somehow, whether we realize it or not. Some people think that we can access that through psychedelic drugs like DMT or mushrooms. Some think meditation is how you get there, becoming one with your environment. All applicable in this scenario. What about multiple universes or realities? Certainly that would exist in this story, right? Because, as I said, we are acting out all possibilities, all universes, all possible realities. And it brings a whole new meaning to the word infinite, right? I mean, not really. It's the same meaning that infinite always had, but it's a scale of infinity that you've probably never thought of before because it's hard to actualize. But this infinity means that, again, every possible interaction between energy exists. So in one reality, I'm sitting right here. In another reality, I'm sitting right here. And in another, I'm sitting over here, right? And so on and so forth. And same thing with the bottle. This bottle's here. In another reality, the bottle's here. It's incredibly crazy to think about what infinite really means if you consider that all possible interactions are occurring right now. So that could be fun to talk about, right? One more idea. Suppose you were to become one with the energy around you, and you learned how to manipulate the energy around you. That's some Dr. Manhattan shit right there. That'd be pretty cool. That'd be interesting to talk about. These are all potential future discussions, potential future episodes. If any of these interest you and you have some thoughts on them, I'd love to hear them. If you want to talk about them in the comments, you can. Or if you want to come hang out, chat about it on camera, we can do that too. The next video that I want to do is going to be a Q&A video. So in a couple of weeks, and I'll announce a specific date and time coming up pretty soon, but I will go live. I'll start out with answering some of the questions that have been posted in the comments. That should give you guys plenty of time to log on and watch live, and then you can submit questions in real time, and I will do my best to respond to them right away, and we can have a conversation that way. I want to also do a couple of giveaways. So the first one I'm going to do is for this video. If you go on and subscribe to my YouTube channel, like the Whiskey and Words Facebook page, and share this video, you will be entered in for the giveaway. I think I'm going to do a couple of etched glasses and maybe some whiskey stones, which you don't have to use for whiskey. Whatever your beverage of choice is, you can use them. Should be pretty cool. So do those three things, and I will choose one of you at random. And then for the Q&A video, everybody who comments a question will be entered in for a different giveaway, and I haven't decided what that'll be yet, but I'll announce it before I start that episode. So a couple of cool ways for you to get some cool drinking stuff. Last thing I want to talk about is what I've been drinking throughout this episode. You might have noticed it's changed throughout the video. So I'm currently in South Carolina on vacation, so I've used the opportunity of having some nice scenery to film for this video, and also I have acquired some local whiskeys, and that's what I've been drinking throughout the video. So what I'm drinking right now, and what was in the flask in the scene at the beach, is Wicked Honey from Holy City Spirits. It's very good. I give it an A+ for sure. It's sweet, so if you don't like sweet, this isn't for you, but you may have tried other honey whiskeys like Jack Daniel's Tennessee Honey, which is one of my go-tos. This is very different. It's made from local honey, and you can tell in the taste that it's different. There's nothing artificial about it. When you drink other honey whiskeys, you taste a sweetness, and you attribute that to a honey flavor, but you can taste the honey in this, and it's much different. It's really good. I like it a lot. They have a couple other cool pours. One of them is Ghost Honey, which is the same honey but also ghost pepper. I'm not going to try that because I'm not a fan of spicy, especially when it comes to beverages. It hurts my brain to think about that, but if that's your thing, you should give it a try. But I like it a lot. The second drink that I had in the video is made by Highwire Distilling Company. It's New Southern Revival rye whiskey, and I got the opportunity to go to this distillery while I was down here and chat with one of the guys about it. It's got a very surprisingly complex flavor. I'm not usually a rye drinker, but it's very smooth. It's got a peppery taste and then a little bit of honey on the finish, and it's surprising that they've achieved that complexity with such a small ingredients list and such a pure whiskey. It's very good, and I've tried a couple other whiskeys while I was there, and they're all pretty good too. Definitely check them out if you can find them. And lastly, I'm not sure how to pronounce it exactly, but it's either Vessey's or VC's straight bourbon whiskey from Charleston Distilling Company, also local, also uses all local ingredients in their whiskey. It's pretty good. It's a straight bourbon. It's there's nothing too crazy about it. It's smooth. probably the best part of this whiskey is the bottle. I don't know if you can see it in the video, but it's got a pretty cool raised palm tree and the company's name on it. Pretty neat. But all of these are certainly worth a try. If you're ever in Charleston, certainly check them out. And there's a couple others around too I didn't get to this time, but I certainly mean to in the future. But that's what I got for this one. Again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.